and no one knows the situation with Tua better than our Laura Rutledge, who is back with us here. And Laura is safe and sound, but very plugged in. And I know you've been talking to a lot of people over the last week or so about Tua's situation. We saw that video last week. What are you hearing about his progress since then?
Well, Greeny, this whole time they wanted to take a very conservative approach with Tua. That's important when it comes to the healing of the hip and just the long-term prognosis for his long-term health, which obviously the durability, everything that's in question here, people want to see that happen. So just a few days ago, he began some of the drills that they want to see from the further teams that wanted to look at this. Now, this is what you would call routes on air, which is what they started doing. Not this drill that you're seeing on the screen, because that's what he tweeted out. But they started to do routes on air. So we're talking about timing routes. We're talking about deep routes, throwing to actual receivers. I am told by somebody who was there in the building when this happened that when he began to do this, they threw about 20 passes and he completed 17 of them. The 3 misses were by inches. Now, remember, Tua Tagovailoa is the most accurate downfield passer since ESPN began tracking that in 2011. So right off the bat, with him getting back into this more serious activity from an athletic standpoint, he's already off to a great start. That was very encouraging. That video that happened from these routes on air was sent out to NFL teams, offering a lot of reassurance there. And Greeny, the belief continues to be that whenever the NFL season begins next season, he would be able to play. Tua Tagovailoa would be ready by that point if a team is asking him to play that early.
And I quoted you yesterday, but I did it off the top. I want to make sure I have this right, because I know you've been talking both with his team and with others about what his expectation is and the teams that seem to be interested. I was saying yesterday, I believe you said that the Dolphins continue to be a team you are hearing is expressing significant interest. What do we know about his expectation for where he's going to go on the 23rd?
Yeah, I heard you say that. Big fan of the show, and you are absolutely correct. Tua Tagovailoa continues to get a lot of interest from the Dolphins. That's at least one team we know that's continually asked. But so many of these teams are doing their due diligence on this and continue to connect with Tua's doctors, the doctors that have been close through all of this. And of course, they'll be one of those first teams that come April 10th, when they do the final MRI before the draft, which is to check for cartilage buildup and just check the hip and make sure it looks good. After a full month of athletic activity, they're going to be sending out that MRI to teams like the Dolphins, of course, who have expressed interest, and other teams as well. They continue to get more and more calls. And Greeny, it was interesting because last week, just the video that Tua tweeted out, it was just, a little drill. There's so much more that he's been doing, but that little video even got more teams calling, more teams interested in exactly what he's doing. And that's where I think we'll continue to see that develop. We'll continue to see that interest go around. And it's like you guys have been saying, he really may not be there by that 5th pick for the Dolphins. They really may need to go up a little further to get him. I would still say the flex point is right there at that 3 pick, because I think Burrow and Chase Young will be 1 and 2. And then that 3 pick is where it gets really, really interesting.
And then quickly, because I know you've been talking to a lot of the other potential draftees, and this is like, we've never been through a draft process like this one. And there are some who I have to believe will be hurt by this process and the way it's working out. What do you know about that?
Well, look, this will happen throughout this draft. It's just a product of what we're dealing with as a country right now. But I do think that Jordan Love could be somebody who is hurt by what's going on with the limitations with NFL teams not being able to bring guys in. He's somebody that, as you guys have talked about, he's so interesting. He has the Patrick Mahomes comparisons. And look, that's going to take time to develop. But for him, teams might want to really fall in love with him. They might want to bring him in a little bit more. He has had limited contact with teams before all of this happened and before the restrictions were put in place, but I could see him maybe suffering a little bit. Still expect him to go in the first round. Somebody who I think has been helped by all of this is Justin Herbert, somebody who everyone looks at him and says, look, he doesn't have any questions from the measurables. He's somebody that, yes, you may have questions in other realms, but when you look at him, he is everything you want to see from the prototypical size standpoint. And I think that's important. Another thing about Herbert is he was able to throw at the combine. He was the MVP of the Senior Bowl, and he was able to have his pro day. So just the timing worked out a little bit better for him. That could work in his favor.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Dan, Because it feels to me like maybe this goes back now to old school. Like this Jordan Love at Utah State, rather than bringing him into your building and letting him do a bunch of things that don't really have anything to do with football anyway and falling in love with him, teams will actually look at the film, see what he did, and make a decision based on that. Do you think that hurts him?
No, Greeny, because I think that teams are going to look at his tape, and I said this yesterday, what you thought of Jordan Love in December is what they're probably going to think of Jordan Love now. And the teams that really liked his tape going into the season and then watched his tape and understood the situation and said, you know what, we think Jordan Love is a franchise quarterback. We think Jordan Love is a quarterback that is a bona fide starter in the NFL. If they thought that in December, they're not going to have any experience with him to nitpick and go, oh, you know what? We asked him this question and we didn't like it answer. Maybe he's not the guy we thought it was. We thought he was. And so I think that general managers that are good at their job are going to watch tape on Jordan Love and look at what he potentially could be with all those things that we've talked about, people and coaching, instead of trying to nitpick all the flaws of his game. So Laura's got a point. There's probably going to be less teams that fall in love with him because of being able to look at him and go, wow, that was a sick throw at a pro day. But the teams that are watching the tape and looking at him, who liked him in December, are still going to like him now.
Swagoo, how about Herbert? Well, you heard Laura make the point. He did everything that he could possibly do. The timing might have actually fallen in his favor. How does all this affect him, you think?
Laura is absolutely right about Justin Herbert, because I relate Justin Herbert a lot to Josh Allen. The size, the ability to move, played in Mario Cristobal's offense in Oregon, which really was a run-centric, and they wanted to have a lot of play action. Justin Herbert was talked about being the first overall draft pick a year ago. So I think a lot of teams will be enamored with that. They'll be enamored with, like Laura said, his size, his ability, and he's been able to go through the evaluation process, which I still think is very, very important with what we have going on right now with this pandemic.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.